All right, we're live. We're live on YouTube. All right, we're live. We're live on YouTube. The stream is volume on it. Let's turn that off. Snap. Oh, hi. Oh, hi, Cameron Push. How's it going? We are here creating a brand new Rage Quit Bird for my first ever Corvallis Arts Walk, but not the first ever Corvallis Arts Walk by a long shot. So we're just gonna start. I have my rough that I've set up using reference photos and just getting the general composition going. I have established that one of the things I'm going to do, when, I'm not sure, depends on how it goes, is to add ivy at the bottom here so that I have leaves that can break the frame of the image, which fits with all of the other Rage Quit birds that I have in the series, where parts of the foliage break the frame a little bit. But that is not right now. We are going to start with the bird. I'm going to give the black that I start with a little bit of a tone so that I can adjust it later if I would like to. Oh. All right. Let us get started. Skipping the songs so that it moves on to the next songs because it sounded too quiet. But also going to turn the volume up for myself. Trying to just map out specific parts of this bird. You know what I just realized, Cameron? YouTube streaming has moderators. No, there wasn't. I was just thinking um about people who have like really large YouTube streams. Do they have like moderation where they don't have to do everything themselves? Turns out, yeah. So congratulations on your sword. I'm trying to figure out what to do about the legs. Maybe I should figure out the exact dimensions of the bust of Athena, and then I can make sure that the raven legs feel like they fit. You are a moderator now. It doesn't call it it's not a sword though, it's a wrench. But making sure that my phone is off. Spencer! Found the chat feature was blocked by an ad blocker. Oh, look at you. I'm glad you could catch the stream. Glad you could make it. Hello. Welcome. It's very chill. We're listening to lo-fi and starting on this Rage Quit Raven for your viewing pleasure. I've decided that I'm going to start on the Raven part. Looking at the weather for downtown, and you know, partly cloudy to rainy. It's probably not the perfect day to be out and about traipsing, but also not the worst. It's still very spring-like today. It's almost 60 degrees here, so that's nice. Now I know I'm starting my participation in the Arts Walk a little early, but I have a time conflict this afternoon, and so I wanted to make sure that I got to make something, but also that later, when the stream won't be live, people will have a substantial amount of progress to watch. Cameron says, seems like a bird drawing might be appropriate for CAW. Yeah, that was my thought. Since their logo is, in fact, a crow or a raven. I had a feeling that doing a core vid of any kind, would be fair game. All right. I'm actually going to undo that sketchiness. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this layer to multiply. And underneath it, I am going to put just a bold shape down. Just to make sure that it's all solid. And as I'm working with other layers below it, I don't have to worry about my raven layer being slightly transparent. If I change the color of the background, it won't show through. The raven itself will be the color that I painted. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to take a crisp brush. I think this one maybe? Nah, that one's too... We're gonna take a pen brush. Yeah. And we are going to basically clean up this edge. Spencer says, in LA, we don't have pigeons. We have a few established unkindness of ravens throughout the city. One roosts in my neighborhood, and I hear them mid-morning and at twilight. Ooh, what do they sound like? Also, I didn't realize that LA just didn't have pigeons, and that instead there were ravens everywhere. Ooh, also, I know that a group of crows is called a murder. What is a group of ravens called? Oh, an unkindness. So, established unkindnesses of ravens was the technical term. That is fascinating. From my understanding, I understood ravens to be largely solitary birds, but perhaps that is a misconception on my part. How many ravens are in each of these unkindnesses? No idea how they have no pigeons? I also have no idea. You think they're very social but enjoy their space. Interesting. It's very interesting. I think corvids in general, but, you know, ravens specifically, are fascinating birds. Ravens and crows, the level of intelligence is super interesting. Spencer says, I've only ever seen a half dozen at a time, but they flock in big numbers over a very large area. Wow. I'm really curious about the fact that a group of crows is called a murder. A group of ravens is called an unkindness. A group of blue jays is just called a party or a band. What are other corvids? There are a lot of corvids. But why do crows and ravens get such a negative group name? I wonder when that was established and how much it has to do with, like, myth and superstition. They make the usual caw occasionally, but mostly they make a sort of echoey click type sound. Interesting. So here's a question. Because from what I have learned, every time I see a crow here, I have to look up, like, the difference between a crow and a raven. And the internet is always like, crows make caw noises, and ravens, you absolutely know that it's a raven. Maybe because they're scavengers and gather on corpses? I mean, maybe. Too smart for their own good, had to be knocked down a peg? Ah. It's to minimize the corvid ego. So it's interesting that you describe the raven sound as being a caw. Spencer, I just saw your message. Sorry about the delay. It's definitely a different caw than a crow, a little lower pitched and more resonant. I mean, that definitely lines up with what the internet says. What do they, how do they call it? When text tries to describe bird sounds, it's very interesting because they sort of act like you're gonna know what they mean. They're like chickadees. Chickadees have a chickadee-dee-dee sound. And you're like, sure, I get it. That makes sense. So with the article that I recently read, they're like, crows have a caw sound and ravens have a rock sound, like R-A-W-K. And I'm like, all right, I guess I get what that means. All right, there is our raven shape. I am going to go ahead and make the decision that I don't like that little bump there that I originally drew. So, and then what we're going to do is we're going to merge this flat background layer with the multiply sketch that I just did, and I am going to make a selection of it, and I'm going to make a clipping mask. And what that means is that as I am painting over this, it's not going to go outside of the shape because I made a mask. And I'm going to, there we go, quickly undo that illustrative moment. All right, so let's start with this brush. Spencer says, oh, that actually makes sense. The crow sound seems more about the throaty gravel sound, and a raven sounds more like the tone that is prevalently featured with the throaty gravel under... Yeah, no, none of that made sense to me. I'm glad it makes sense to you. I basically need the internet to provide me with auditory examples. Which I suppose I can just Google. It's out there. All right, so one of the things I love about this reference photo is and it's not a great reference photo, it's not super descriptive, but the variation in color of the feathers. I mean, you can definitely tell that it's a black bird, right? But I really want to illustrate that kind of feeling of the feathers being very, I don't even know how to describe it, bold. Spencer says the click sound is super cool. It's almost like hitting a really resonant wood block, and they do it 3 or 4 times in a row. That actually makes sense to me, because when Cameron and I were in Ireland, Ireland doesn't have ravens. They have rooks, which are like even more haggard looking, in my opinion, but super cool. There was a rook on top of a pub sign in a downtown area. This was the most Irish aesthetic I've ever seen. And it sounded like those wooden frogs that you run a wooden, like the little instruments that have the ridged back, and you run a little wooden like stick over the back and it makes a ribbit sound. It sounded like that. It was super, super cool. So I think the key to this, and we're gonna figure out if this is right or not. The key to this is to not have too many brush strokes as we deal with the color variation, or to at least not have it look like it's too many brush strokes. To have it feel like it's just a bold, simple gradient, I think will give me the glossy tone I'm going for. That's so cool that that's what they actually, that's just how they sound, because I assumed that this rook was imitating something it had heard. I didn't know that this was a really common rook sound, so that's so cool. Raven's feathers in person are super cool. They have almost a green iridescence in the sun. Interesting. All of the photos that I could find were largely purple, you know? But raven feathers, this one's a little greenish. This is very artsy though. I do love how blackbirds largely, but you know, ravens, starlings, crows, they look like one color most of the time, but if you look close enough, it's got iridescence, as you were saying. All right. So one of the main things I want to do is I want to get the values figured out for this. Swamp Hag! You saw starling on your walk today? A shiny boy? They are so shiny and colorful. Hello. Happy Thursday. How are you doing? Spencer says, it might just be the smog in LA making them green. Happy Thursday. Let's see. I didn't like that, what I did there. one of the things I also want to get is the sense of depth that these are feathers stacked on top of each other. One moment while I close the blinds, because the background of the window is causing quite a bit of... It's causing me to squint while I look at this, and that's making things really difficult. How's your day going? Bees and I are ordering food, and we are ready to relax with some burb art. What kind of food are you ordering? I am doing just fine. I'm excited to be here making bird art for the CAW. In about a half hour is when the CAW actually starts. And I'm going to post, I'm going to take a couple minutes and post a promo on my Instagram. But I wanted to make sure that I had enough time to do a full piece, but that when I have to leave later, there's plenty of stream for somebody to probably just scrub through watching the process, which is totally fine. The majority is that, like, I wanted to make sure that this got to a done state by 6, which is when I have to leave. So I like in this image this black shadow here, which is giving the sense of the other wing. The unhealthy kind of food. That sounds great. Ooh, cheesesteak. Wowie. That sounds great. I hope you all enjoy that. If I can get a sense of multiple feathers just with a few lines. Feathers are one of those interesting things that are so... They seem so simple. And they're always so elegant. I say always, there's always going to be an exception. And so you think it should be fairly simple to understand what's going on. And it's always more complex. But it's really satisfying when you get it, though. For the record, she is getting a salad. All right. Let's focus a little bit on the face. Do want to make sure that I get... Well, that's almost purple, and I don't want that. kind of want a gray looking beard. How was getting YouTube Live set up versus Twitch? It took a couple of test streams this morning to figure out what settings I needed. The biggest confusion was the fact that I needed to make sure that I set the setting to ultra low latency. The normal setting that YouTube has for latency was painfully long. Cameron was helping me set it up, and it was painful waiting for him to hear me and for me to see his messages. And so I'm like, it's gotta be faster if I'm going to interact with people. But once we figured that out, it was all pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of changing the settings in OBS. And then when you know, connecting your YouTube account, and when you go live, it prompts the broadcast management where you set the title and the description and all of that kind of stuff. So it was pretty simple. Which was a relief, because sometimes these kind of things, you feel like you're spending the whole time working on the technical side of it, and you don't feel like you ever get to the fun part, which is, you know, the setting up how it looks, or the actual making of art. This image has like a ring around the eye, and I'm trying to figure out if that's something I want to put in or not. I actually think it might be good in helping to establish where the eye is on this bird. The fun part equals art. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the reason I'm here, so... My hope is that it would be the fun part. Ooh, I'm liking that transition as I look at the tiny thumbnail. This already looks so good. Aw, bees, thank you. Oh, yeah. You zoom out, I really love that. That's pretty cool. Alright, let's take broader brush. Blend this a little bit more. Also, just bring this darker color in a little bit because, you know, this is a black bird, and so it's mostly dark. Oh, that makes me really happy, Swamp Hag. Thank you. Thank you, bees. Y'all are so nice. I do appreciate y'all being here so that I can have somebody to talk to while I work through this. It makes it a little bit easier to talk through stuff. Hopefully making this broadcast a little bit more enjoyable for people who are going to be watching it later. I haven't quite figured out the how to basically talk to yourself mode. That's pretty difficult, because if I were just in my studio by myself while I was making this, I wouldn't be talking to myself. All right. I think it's probably a good idea to start working on the bust of Athena. At the very least, getting the structure of the head of the bust so that I can figure out where the raven's feet are resting. So let's go ahead and move this over here, pull up my other reference. Won't lie, really excited about this one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to start a new layer underneath the raven. For right now, let's go ahead and lock the raven layer so that I don't accidentally draw on the wrong layer and undo a ton of work. And so I'm going to go ahead and take this tan gray from my rough. Just make it a little bit darker. Go back to my sketchy brush. And this is what we're going to use to really map out this face. Actually I'm trying to figure out where to start. I've got the rough, but I don't want to lean too heavily into the rough because the rough was just to make sure that the composition in general was going to work. In fact, this head looks pretty different underneath this helmet. But the main thing that I want to figure out is the top part of this helmet, because this is the part that's going to be interacting with the raven. I want to try and keep it as close to this this reference as possible. However, if we need to take artistic liberties so as to make a better composition, we will. Because this is not a life study illustration. This is a comical illustration using photo references as references. We will, we may, we shall. So, this actually is an interesting plume going here. I don't know if we're gonna see any of it. One of the things we can do is move the raven slightly if we need to, but I think this might offer some interesting points for the raven to put his feet, namely here and here. I think that might be cool. So maybe we won't worry too much about that. The burb is so stinking cute. Thank you. And he's saying such a cute thing. I mean, is there anything more respectful than this burb? Yes, many things. But that's kind of the point. Wholesome. That's how we describe this bird. All right. So the way I roughed this out is actually slightly incorrect. This is all part of the helmet. Part of the question is how much do I care? But I do think this helmet is sitting a little high. Actually comes down more than it seems like it does. As long as it looks generally right, that's really all we're going for. But I do like the pose of this photo. Yeah. All right. So one of the things I'm going to do for the time being is I'm going to go into my rough and I'm going to take away the speech bubble just while I'm sketching out this head. When I start to actually paint it, I'm going to want to bring that back because I don't want to spend a ton of time rendering a part of a statue that isn't going to be seen. All right. So, as you can see on the rough, real sketchy. So what I need to do is not rely on where I put stuff in the rough, but try and focus on the reference photo. wherein the neck is a weird shape. Won't lie. It's got a weird shaped neck here. We may alter that. Ah, I'm just noticing that this part, this pointy part, is actually probably the back part of the helmet. Thick neck. She's been working out. She does not miss neck day. And neither should you. Oh. I really love how flowy this hair looks. We're going to do the same thing we did for the bird, where once we've figured out the outline, we're going to put a flat underneath it of a solid color and then merge them together so that I can put a mask on it so I don't have to worry about working in outside the lines, and also so that when I work on the background, I don't have to worry about realizing that as I was painting the statue, I didn't make it transparent or opaque enough, and parts of the background are shining through, and I don't want that. All right, we're gonna zoom out here. And I don't have the entirety of this bust in the image, so we're just gonna make sure that as I put this in, that it makes sense for the composition. Because if it doesn't make sense, we won't include it. Now, normally, my rage quit birds that you can see, the starling isn't one of them, but the hummingbird and the Steller's jay, you can see that there's a frame and that there's something breaking the frame. And normally that's just foliage. I am going to have some ivy, thanks to a suggestion from Bees, breaking the frame, and I think it'll be perfect for this background, which is pretty sparse at the moment. But I'm wondering if I should have the whole bust of Athena breaking the frame, i.e. have break that frame, because I can either have, let me put the frame in to illustrate. I can have the frame here where the bust of Athena actually looks like it's in front of it, like so, in which case we'll have to adjust like the lines of parts of the bust so that there's no tangents, or we crop the bust of Athena so that it fits within the frame, and then this ends up being, you know, white. That's not a great illustration because a lot of it isn't there. I think I want to try having it break the frame, which means, let me unlock the bird for a second. Moving things up. And then also maybe making this slightly smaller. Not a lot, but just a little bit. And it'll help accentuate how big this bird is. So, which is ravens are big. They are big birds. So I think that will help things. All right. We are 5 minutes away from the actual CAW actually starting, so I'm going to take this moment. Just a couple of minutes to post on Instagram. Which means that in just a little while, the links that I've posted will be live so that you can see the other people who are participating in the virtually only section of this. Beep, 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 beep. Taking a moment to type is hard. Double checking that this goes to the correct thing. Yes, it does. That's good to know. And then tagging. That's good enough. All right. Okay, we're back. Thanks for waiting. And we're back. So I'm noticing on this statue that it's got I'm assuming that says Athena. So I might write that in there. One of the things I want to do is I want to take this rough and sort of scooch it up just a little bit. Also, while I'm at it, I need to open a previous Rage Quit bird so that I can make sure that the frame is the same. Because I would like these to look nice together. Even though they're very different birds, they're very different sayings. Here we go. Let's go ahead and put the thanks I hate it J over it. I've already made the file itself the right size. So now what we're gonna do, we are gonna pull up a grid. And the framing sits at roughly a 1/4 inch. Doesn't need to be exact, just needs to be close enough. This will also help me as I work to decide things that are going to break the frame and things that aren't by knowing exactly where the frame is going to be. All right. So now we can get rid of this. And we can also turn off the grid. There. So now we have the frame of this. And one of the things I'm noticing is that the objects are a little bit crowded on the left side. What I want to do, slide them over just a little bit. Yeah, I think it's too off center. I was thinking about maybe having the raven tail break the frame, but I don't think I will. I think I'm gonna do this. All right. Then take the rough. Just move it so it's a little bit more in line with the stuff. And with the rough, bring the speech bubble back in. And figure out I need to put the guide up here. I need to lock it. Yeah, it still tries to snap to it sometimes, but I need to take this, the quoth the raven thing. This is not super important. The idea for this is that it's supposed to look like handwritten, you know, Victorian. Edgar Allan Poe himself wrote this handwriting. So as long as that's within frame, that's fine. The speech bubble, however, is not terrible. The bubble itself doesn't necessarily need to be that big. You know what? Keeping the speech bubble in mind, we may actually want to consider moving the raven and the statue to the left again. In which case, maybe we do have it break the frame. I feel like taking the speech bubble and moving it up just a little bit. I don't want the speech bubble to break the frame. I think that might be the thing. All right. Let's find these layers with the rough of the statue and the bird and move that over, keeping the speech bubble where it is. All right. That I feel like is good. So let's go ahead and get rid of the text for now. We can also hide the guide layer and do what I originally said I was going to do, which is put the flat on this bust of Athena. And so what we do is we set this sketch to multiply. We make the brush nice and big, and I want to pull in one of these warm earth tones from the rough. Maybe even more so than that. All right. Cameron says, can you explain setting the layer to multiply? I feel like I've asked that before, but still not in my head. Absolutely. So it's not 100% necessary, but sometimes I'll sketch in a color that is not necessarily dark enough so that when I am doing the flat underneath it, it's sort of hard to see where it starts and stops. Also, and this is the big reason, is for the edges of this. By setting it to multiply, as I fill in the background, this isn't a great example with this color, so let's change the color to something darker. Let's say I was filling it in with this red color. By setting it to multiply, I can see the edges of the sketch, line art sometimes, whereas if I have it just set to normal, I can't actually see that, and it is a little bit difficult to see that I'm actually filling it all in. So I set it to multiply, and then I go back to the color I was supposed to be working in. And actually what I'm going to do to make this a little easier on my eyes is on this layer below it, I'm just going to fill it in with a dark color, just temporarily to help me see what I'm doing. But it helps me make sure that I've got the whole thing. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to overfill, and we're going to go in and erase just like we did with the raven. Didn't quite do all of the work on that shoulder there. But we can go in and fix that. And the shape at the top here doesn't matter as much because there's a bird in front of it. But I don't want to forget it, because if I want to move the bird, I don't want to have to go back and redo work. If that makes sense. So it makes the colors more pronounced so you can see the difference. It makes the colors slightly transparent. So one of the things I could also do is I could have done an opacity, which would make things transparent so that when it was over the line, I could sort of see it. But that makes things lighter, whereas multiply make things darker. while having them be transparent, because the idea is that it is multiplying with the layer below it, so it has to, you have to be able to see the layer below it. I'll be honest, I spoke like I 100% understood how that worked, and it's, you know, the truth is that I don't, but that's how it works for me, for using it, so. All right, gonna get this shoulder in there. All right, so one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm just cleaning up this sketch down here just a little bit, because it's a little bit messy. And while this doesn't need to be exact, because I am painting over it, the edges need to be more or less there. Got a little haphazard here at the end. We're going to decide that the hair stops there, even though in the reference it doesn't. Actually, I can just erase the hair here. Give it a little bit more interest. Alright, so now, come up here. Clean this up just a little bit. Like I said before, not gonna be seeing it because there's a bird in front of it, but I do want the mask to be largely neat and tidy. All right, so now what we're gonna do is on the flat layer, just gonna go in and erase all of that stuff we don't need. Whoop. Need to make sure I have the right color selected. Color of these edges with the multiply layer doesn't look like, it ends up making it look super dark because it starts multiplying with the background color, that brown, rather than with the light tan. But that's not as important because I'm going to be making a clipping mask and then largely changing that color. So the multiply layer is more just to get us to be able to see what we're doing while we're doing it. I'm gonna make, you know what? I'm not using the same brush that I was using when we did the raven, so let's go ahead and neaten this up a little bit. Okay, what's a clipping mask? Well, depends on what program you're using, but a clipping mask is also known as an alpha mask, but it is so when you're working with traditional media, like say watercolor, you might put down, I'm not even sure what you call it, but it's kind of a waxy substance that you put down on areas where you don't want your watercolor paint to touch. Like you want the back of it to be a specific color, or you want it to be used with a different medium or whatever. So you mask off all of the stuff that you don't need, that you don't want the watercolor to affect, so that when you paint over it with watercolor, it won't touch that. Clipping mask in digital programs is largely the same, where you set a boundary where you say, like, even if my brush, my hand, goes outside of this boundary, it's not going to do anything. more layman example would be like if you're painting a room, you put masking tape on the ceiling and the trim so that your paint doesn't go beyond that point. It's basically the same thing. Like painter's tape when painting a wall. Yes, you were on the same brainwave. Ooh, I just saved my image. I hadn't done that in a while. I live on the edge. And this is... undo that. There we go. To erase the sketch there, because that's not supposed to be there. Oh, this image has this song has bird sounds in it. How appropriate. So because I have so much of that dark outline, which means that my undercolor is not going right up to the edge of my multiply layer, what I'm going to do, rather than like last time where we just merged the flat with the multiply layer, I'm going to set this back to normal, and I'm going to duplicate it a couple of times, because like I said, the color of it is not as important as the shape of it, the lines that we've mapped out, the outline. And I just want to make sure that it's opaque. So now I'm going to merge all of that together. So now that's all on one layer. And then I'm going to create selection from layer and create a layer mask is what Clip Studio Paint calls it, a layer mask. And now we can delete, well, we don't need to delete it. We can just make it invisible. And we can go back and we can make our bird the full value that it's supposed to be. Let's go ahead and lock our bird layer so that we don't accidentally paint on top of it. So now we've started this bust of Athena, and like before, we have a clipping mask on it so that if I were to paint over it, it doesn't move beyond the frame that I've set. It is masked off. So I sketched it in this brown. Ooh, we need to go back to our... Yeah, let's go back to our sketch brush for just a minute, because I do need to figure out this face and stuff. Tricks of the trade! Yes! One of my favorite things is showing people how I do stuff in digital programs. So, I used this brown brush, and I think I like the idea of the overall feel of it being kind of sepia toned, to sort of make it seem like it's this old, almost an old photograph-esque style illustration. But I don't know that I want it to be that brown, so we're gonna continue sketching with a color that's a little more gray. And I'm going to focus on the face, because I want to. And to me, faces are like one of my top favorite things to paint. Sometimes it's birds, sometimes it's faces. All right, now that it's 4:15, I want to double check that the virtual gallery is up. Yay, it is. Good. All right. I may take a liberty or two with this face, because as you zoom in, it really kind of starts to look like a statue you can buy from Amazon, because that's what the reference photo is. And I want it to look like a statue, for sure. But maybe not like a mass-produced one. But this one had, out of all of... Ooh, don't do that. Out of all of the busts of Athena that I could find, this one was the clearest and had the angle I wanted. Getting that Grecian face. Is it Grecian? Is it Roman? I'll be honest, I'm not sure. But getting that face nice and established. All right. Sure. Realized I didn't draw in her collar. All right. So now what I want to do, now that I've sort of established the shape of where this is going, I want to go back to my raven for just a little bit. And I want to figure out, I'm on a separate layer than the rest of my raven bird. And I want to figure out how his feet are resting on this statue. A little bit of variance. So I was thinking that one claw might be resting on here, which can allow that edge of the helmet to maybe interact with the foot a little bit and, you know, cause a little bit of visual interest. And maybe this one is facing downwards a little bit. The claw being kind of behind the statue. As much as I love painting birds, I'll be honest, painting bird feet, really difficult. Especially since I've got like claws and stuff. I can picture the bird kind of rocking back and forth as it found that footing. Yeah! I am largely making this up. I need to find a potential reference. Let's go with this one. I'm gonna have to move a window over for a second. There we go. And we are going to flip this reference. And this is what we're gonna use to kind of help me figure out just how this is curled around. And I think it's probably like that. Maybe it's that it looks fairly straight, but it's got that pointy end, so you know that part of that is claw. Swamp Hag says, that's what my feet look like. That's what my feet look like too. All right, so I like that back foot. Forefoot needs a little bit more. This arc needs to be less just straight up one curved line. It needs to have more variance in it. Because ravens do have, you know, digits. They have knuckles. They're Baba Yaga style. All right, I like that. I like that a lot. All right, let's go back to the bust of Athena. And I think it's time to start actually painting this, actually blending this together. Because right now it looks pretty, it looks like the bird did, where it was a sketch on top of a flat, and then we rendered it and things started to look more realistic. So let's start doing that, but with the statue of Athena. I think one of the things, I'm not liking the brown at the moment. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to create a correction layer that I pin to just the layer below it, so just the statue of Athena, and I'm gonna bring the saturation down on that just a little bit. So whereas before it looked like this, I want it to feel like it's a gray statue. I can always put like a sepia layer over the top of it to bring some of that warmth back if I decide I want it. But things aren't feeling statue enough for me. And so we're gonna lower the saturation, and then I'm gonna merge it with the layer below. And I'm gonna hold the mask. So I'm gonna keep the mask where it is. Yeah, so a correction layer. This is Clip Studio Paint specific. You create a layer, which you can kind of, well, we'll just make another one. And what that does is it affects all of the layers beneath it. So there's this layer here that is just a correction layer. And when I come in here, I can change the hue, the saturation, and the luminosity or value, the brightness. So I can make everything below this layer, because remember that the raven is on top of it. Really bright, really dark. I can make it really saturated or completely desaturated. And I can, if I boost the saturation a little bit, I can change the hue just on a hue scale. And so it allows you to make broad strokes changes to a layer that maybe you didn't initially put in. So what I did is I made a broad strokes layer to desaturate what I was working on a little bit, and then I merged it with the layer below so that it applied those changes. B says that I'm really smart doing it like that. I don't remember how Photoshop works. I mean, I feel like Photoshop, it has adjustments that you can make to a layer, but then it just applies the adjustments. But you can still alter them, but it's not like on a layer above it. It's not on its own layer, which is something that Clip Studio Paint does differently. Have I ever thought about teaching? Only in the sense that I have thought that I could not teach. I've never thought about teaching in any sort of professional capacity, but I do love explaining the few things that I do understand. You're really great at breaking things down. Thank you. Are there any other questions about my process or what I'm doing that you guys would like to know? All right. So contrary to how the reference photo looks, I do feel like I need to make this part of the hat a lot darker because there's a bird on it. Just to give the sense of shadow. Though I feel like I should probably kind of work through the whole thing a little bit and then go back and boost anything that I might need to make darker or lighter. Is there a feature I wish I had in my art program? Yes. So one of the things that Clip Studio Paint has is that you can draw in a straight line just by hitting Shift. However, it marks the start of the straight line to where you last hit your brush, and then it gives you a ruler as you hold the Shift down and you click on it, except it makes the line as thick it could possibly be. Whereas in Photoshop, the way they do it is you hold the Shift key down while you are drawing and it goes in a straight line, but it allows you to keep variation of the brush. And you can do that in some ways on Clip Studio Paint, but there's a lot more steps involved with it. And I sort of I didn't realize how often I used that feature until I didn't have it anymore. Swamp Hack asks, what hardware are you using to draw? Do you have one of those Wacom Johns? Yes. Yes, I do. I am working off of a Wacom Intuos tablet that is plugged into my tower. It's how I learned to illustrate digitally, so I'm really familiar with it. A lot of people now who get into digital illustration use display tablets like iPads, or Wacom also has display tablets where you are looking at a screen and you are drawing directly on the screen. So where the tip of your tablet pen touches is where, the ink happens. And so far, my experience with that is very limited. I haven't gotten the opportunity to try a bunch of different ones. I don't have the budget or the inclination to get an iPad. But it's a lot more finicky for me. I am used to having my tablet act like a mouse. So the cursor on the screen when I move my mouse, like I'm doing right now, looks the same as when I move the tablet pen. So I'm really used to knowing that rather than looking down at the page I'm drawing on, I look at the screen. And it's very comfortable for me. This is not the case for a lot of people, especially if you haven't spent a lot of time using this kind of tablet. And now, why would you? Because there are more intuitive tablets. But this just is how I learned. I learned this way in high school when I got my first tablet. Back then, they technically had display tablets for professional illustrators, but they were thousands of dollars. So it was cost prohibitive to use those tools. I got to use one once in college, and that was nice. But again, it was just like, well, can't afford it, so I'll use a tool that is a little bit more within my budget. And I was, familiar with it, so. John's may have been too regional of a word to use there. I see. Okay. I vaguely remember you talking about that as a regional word. I don't remember what it means, but, that's fine. I'm actually going to cover up these shapes and look at the reference a little more closely. That's a little bit more of the direction. Any noun is a John. Oh, so it's a regional term for thing. All right, that's cool. The world's most generic pronoun. It's not a pronoun, it's a noun. For a while, a year or so ago, I was working largely from a Microsoft Surface Book 2, wherein the laptop could also be a tablet. And while that had certain benefits, being flexible, I could sit on the couch while I drew. I could basically move my wherever my laptop could go, my tablet could go. But because it was first and foremost designed to be a computer and not designed to be an art tool, the art side of it was a little clunky. And as somebody who has my whole professional career used digital programs with hotkeys, the fact that I couldn't access the keyboard really hindered everything. And there weren't as established gestures for programs like Clip Studio Paint, because Clip Studio Paint is a more affordable illustration program. Now the statue has these patterns, these like scale mail patterns on the helmet and the vest. I'm not going to work on those right this minute because I am kind of just doing broad strokes, getting the general idea of things, and I'm a little bit afraid that I'm going to make them too messy, and I would really just like to not do that. So we will save those for last once we've really kind of established what the rest of this looks like. Swamp Pack says we gotta go into lurk mode. It's been rad hanging and chatting though. CAW. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks for asking questions, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. All right, let's zoom in on this face. Let's get these big old shadows established. the things I like about this reference photo is the way the shadows are set up. It's got this big bold shadow in the middle, and then there's light on either side. So I really want to try and capture that. I think it'll be the most interesting way to have this, but it means that it's gonna look a little messy for a little bit, but while we figure it out. It is incredible how terrible this kind of process looks at the beginning. Part of it is we're working on a face. And brains are real good at seeing faces. And so we're real good at seeing that it's supposed to look like a face, but it doesn't yet. And you just spend your time going, why doesn't it look like a face? This is just reminding me of college when I had to do life drawing studies and still life studies, and the still lifes always had a statue in them. Always, always, always. It was sometimes the closest you can get to still life without having to pay a live model. Which is what we got for a lot of the basics classes. But it also helps you understand value without taking hue into account, which can get people bogged down when they're doing paintings of life models. So when you're painting a still life of a statue, you're looking at the contours of the face, but you're just seeing it in black and white. Maybe a hue depending on the color of the light, but largely it's more simplified. Okay, so one of the things I'm noticing is that I don't like the shape of this cheek. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the mask to this layer. I'm going to come in here and I am going to erase this a little bit to be a little bit straighter. Maybe use this color to help establish the line. And then I'm going to go back in, create a selection, and apply a mask. Oops. Open from the mask. Getting there. Yeah, I think it is coming along nicely. Trying not to get too bogged down in the fine details. Because that's one of the things that can really, like, make something go a lot slower, is if you start working on the fine details too quickly. Because then what you realize sometimes is that when all said and done, you didn't need to be, and maybe probably shouldn't have been, that detailed in certain parts of it. A lot of it has to do with, especially with digital art, how big is this going to be printed? If you are zooming way in on a piece that is going to be a, 4x6 card, a lot of the work that you're putting into it, it's not so much that, like, the image looks bad, though sometimes an over-rendered image that is really small can, like, look a little strange, but it's more just that it's really inefficient, because a lot of the stuff that you're doing is not going to be seen because the image is going to be too small. This is a hurdle with digital illustration, because with traditional illustration, you can sometimes, like, get really, really close to a painting, but for the most part, you constantly have a frame of reference for how big this thing is, because you cannot make it bigger or smaller than what you are at. You have the size of your canvas, and that's as big as this thing can get. And so it's a little bit more natural to step back and look at the whole thing together. And with digital illustration, it's really easy to get bogged down into the details. So one of the things I have to keep in mind is that even though I can make this super detailed really close up, that doesn't make it a more effective image, and sometimes really hinders it. So I don't think I'm going to put a face like it is on the reference image, because I feel like that would be too distracting, especially if this is near the text. I'm not 100% positive at this point if it's going to be covered up or not. That's another thing that I haven't been paying attention to. It might be completely covered up. But our eyes are drawn to faces, and that's one of the things I'm using to my advantage in this composition, because I have the text down here at the bottom, I have this raven, I have text up here. Our eyes naturally are drawn to the largest value change. In this case, it will be the raven. We tend to start at the top left if you are in the United States or other countries where you read from left to right, because your brain starts at the start. Not all countries are like that. And so I'm using that to start at the top, and you move through the bird, you focus on the face of the statue, you read the text, and you don't realize you're doing this. Your brain sort of takes it all in at once, but it like pulls you through the whole image, hopefully. That's the goal with composition. Okay, I'm getting a little bit distracted by the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this tone in here for just a second. Oops. There we go. And that's as I expected. The edge of that was a little bit wonky, but we can fix it real quick. So. Looking at this as a whole, I'm just trying to boost the shadows just a little bit. And I want to get the sense that this is a pillar. having that soft shadow in the front. So that will help give the sense that it's rounded. Rough edge there, fixing that. All right. Oops, 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 oops. There we go. Sometimes when I get to this point, it's hard to see how it's going to come together because there's so many fine little details to focus on. But actually, one of the things I think I should do now is stop working on the statue. The statue has the general idea, right? And if we get rid of the background, you can kind of see that. I'm actually going to fill this in real quick just to make sure that... And we're actually going to make it just a really vicious pink. Yeah, okay. Nothing is showing through. You can see that in this image that, like, the whole general thing is there. And I want to start establishing the background now, because especially with the speech bubble, I don't want to over render too much on the statue, and I only want to render stuff after it's all done, that stuff that feels like it needs more. So I'm going to take a very quick break, and I will be back in just a couple of minutes. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna pull the sketch of this text to the top so that we can have a good sense of what this is supposed to look like, and I will be right back. All right, I'm back. So let's pull up that guide, and we're back. Let's pull up that guide, and let's for design's sake, see what it looks like. Well, okay. I just realized something. It's not a square guide. It is a bunch of rulers. So let me which is actually, it's better. So let me make a frame ruler real quick so that we can keep the guide as it is. Let me take this frame ruler, and I'm thinking maybe the blue of the raven. Not positive, but we're gonna keep that just sort of in our mind's eye. And by in our mind's eye, I mean completely visible. With the bust of Athena, breaking it, as well as the tip of the raven tail. All right, now I do think, one of the things I like about this so far is I do like the warmth of the background that I have in the rough. So I think what I'm gonna do is I am going to we're just gonna eyedrop this color. Make sure we're below all of our elements. And we are gonna fill this in. And I actually think maybe go darker. Yeah, we're gonna give it this kind of color. And then what I'm gonna do with this eraser is use that tool that I was complaining about earlier with the straight line at maximum capacity to my advantage and erase the parts that aren't going to be in the frame. Doesn't have to be super exact. And then I just want to make sure that that's on a rough. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to make a selection of this as well and make a mask of that. And I'm going to create a gradient using the gouache brush. I could just make a gradient. You can do that in digital programs, but they, if they tend to look pretty computerized. So if I want this painterly feel, and I do, I'm going to take this darker color, and I want the bottom of this to be darker because I want the statue itself to kind of pop. And I want the top of this to be lighter because I want the raven to kind of pop. I'm going to use this middle color to kind of blend it in. I like that. I think that looks really... I think it looks really elegant, which is hilarious because of what the raven is saying. And that's kind of the point. And I may debate on just deleting the frame entirely when all is said and done, but it's on a separate layer. That's something we can do. So now, what I kind of want to play with is ivy interacting with this. So first off, I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to look for a reference photo. And this is what I'm looking for. Let's make sure, yep, that's a JPEG. So I like the way that the ivy is interacting with the statue here. And so we're going to keep this up while I try and potentially put some ivy in. So we're going to need to have it be above. I don't think there's anything on this layer. Let's go ahead and lock our statue layer. It needs to be above the statue. And I need my sketching brush, and I need to pick a kind of ivy green. I want it to be a little bit muted so that it plays well with this color palette. Yeah, that one's a little bit better. All right. So now this is a sketch because I'm not 100% sure about this. So now we're going to play with this. I like the idea of the ivy actually wrapping around the statue just a little bit in places. I have a sense of darker leaves down here. Also help things look not quite so monotone. That looks neat. All right, so now let's take just a little bit of variation in color. I want to establish a little bit of depth here. I want to make it seem like the ivy is dense. Ooh, that is cool. Yay. I agree. All right. So what we're going to do now is we are going to focus on the text. This is one of the major focal points of this. And so it does need a little bit of love. Rather than like recreating what I've sketched, I am going to simply refine what I've sketched. Because I think it's close enough, basically. One of the things I am gonna do, come in here, make the speech bubble. I actually need to think about how the other Rage Quit Birds text text is caps lock, very brushy, so I need to, that I'm gonna do on a new layer. It's gonna be separate from the actual outline of the speech bubble and stuff. And we're gonna take this grayish blue and I'm wondering if the should not be in caps lock. If it should be, erasing the text underneath it so that it's not as confusing. I'm gonna try it like this for a little bit because I kind of like the idea that the phrase is shut the fuck up rather than shut the fuck up, you know? And I feel like having cursive lowercase letters for the helps that emphasis. And one of the things I'm going to do, now that I've put this on its own layer, is I am going to center it. Already looks better. And then I'm going to take my gouache brush, which has a rougher edge, and I am going to actually want this to blend a little bit better. Which I think calls, oh, does it call for merging it? All right, well, let's focus on getting the shape. Actually, this outline, the outline of the speech bubble, isn't there on the other ones. So maybe we need to make sure that this is crystal clear without it. Taylor, hello! You're gonna be lurking? I am happy to have you lurk. I hope you enjoy the art. We're going for about another 45 minutes. Happy Thursday. Yeah, let's go ahead and erase the outline of this speech bubble because we don't need it. We may want it. We may feel like it makes things clearer, but it should be clear enough on its own. And if it isn't, then we have to make adjustments with value. And that's something I learned from my graphic design days. If you felt like you needed to put an outline around something so that it was legible, chances are there was a more elegant solution. Woohoo! Applying life-learned skills, indeed. I'm getting a spinning wheel on the stream. Hoping that holy dropped frames, Batman. Hopefully I can just hold on for another 45 minutes. All right, we're gonna keep going. All right, one of the things I'm gonna do to make sure that this is opaque is I'm just gonna duplicate it 3 times and merge all those together. You did a refresh and now it feels fine. You're getting dropped frames, but that ultra low latency sure does come in crystal clear. It seems okay on my end now. So if you're having issues and you haven't refreshed the window, I might suggest that. Definitely want some energy lines around this speech bubble. Really want it to give the sense that it's actively being said. We'll do that for now. Okay. So I actually think I'm gonna redo the speech, the part that like goes upward. And I'm gonna put that on its own layer so that I can make adjustments. Sorry for hitting the microphone. I'm going to straighten this out just a little bit. And move this up. Oops. Do I want to move it up? I actually don't know that I do. I think I just want it to be like right there. And then on a new layer, This way I can make adjustments to the actual speech bubble part of things. All right. All right. That's looking good to me. I'm going to go ahead and be bold and merge the speech bubble with the text so that I can do what I was trying to do earlier and make these sort of jagged edges where the edge of the text happens. Oops. I actually think I don't want it at the top of this S. I want it kind of at the end of brush strokes. For the most part. Though the things I hated is actually a good example because it has the H. Yeah, I only did it at the bottom. Yeah. Oops. I'm erasing instead of painting in white. This had a K in it. How did I do the K? I just did the bottom of them. All right. Yeah, I'm not gonna do the curved part of the P. All right, so for the cursive, a lot of it isn't gonna be Haggard. It's basically only a couple spots. Cameron says, my eyes are starting to bug out. Gonna step away. Have a great end of stream. Thanks for being here, Cameron. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks for helping me test everything earlier. I will talk to you in just a little bit. My goal is to get to a rough finishing point where you get the general idea of the whole thing, so that I have largely done the whole illustration on stream. But I do, unfortunately, have to leave the stream at 6, so it's not, you know, not going to be largely possible. But we're going to do the best we can. We still have a half hour. It's also largely a rule that I've imposed on myself, which is not really necessary. All right, let's go ahead and work on this thing. The Quoth the Raven. This is going to be, I think, a pen brush on a new layer. My goal is to have it look like old letter writing font. Kind of. Not 100% sure what the cues look like. I think they look like that, except I need to bring the stabilization way up. Yeah, that might be too confusing. I'm wondering if one of the things that's going to make this look like handwriting is if it's got straight baseline. Quote the Raven. That's so Raven. All right. I think the rest of this is just going to be painting Ivy. The trick being, I think, to get the shape of the leaves and to not spend too much time rendering each one. And let's go ahead. No, We'll leave the frame layer where it is. Another key, I think, is on the ends, making sure that the leaves are smaller. All right. I need to remind myself what ivy leaves look like. Not just their, how they interact on a vine. Ah, that's not a JPEG. But also just their general shape. There we go. Yeah, I like that. This one's not quite shaped right, but here we go. Man, I am really loving how this is coming together. One of the things I was really excited about in participating in the Corvallis Arts Walk for the first time is I was really excited about having a self-imposed, but having a time restraint for finishing an image. So often, our boundaries for making stuff is limitless. We can make stuff out of anything, any kind of subject. We can take as much time as we want, unless, you know, there's often time constraints is the only constraint that we give ourselves because we're making stuff for a gallery or we're doing a commission or something like that. But I find, and, you know, many people have said this, that constraints are a boost to creativity a lot of the time. Your brain has to problem solve a lot faster. And if you tell yourself that you have all the time in the world to do it, you kind of just put off figuring stuff out, you know? I was like, I'm not gonna work on the chainmail at the moment. I need to make sure that I lay everything else out. And that was good because the majority of the chainmail is covered up by the text. So I really shouldn't spend that much time rendering the whole thing when you're not even gonna see 70% of it. And that's all because I had this time restraint and I wanted to get the general gestalt of it. I don't even know if I used that word correctly. Together before I made those decisions. So it's made pulling this piece together a lot faster than maybe it sometimes goes, you know? And I think that's true for a lot of artists. When we're told that we can illustrate anything, you stare at a blank piece of paper and you're like, but what? What? But when you're told that you have to, you know, paint a flower because for whatever reason, your brain is limited to any flower. That's still pretty broad, but at least it's not anything at all. And in this case, when I know that I only have 3 hours to do it in, again, it's self-imposed, it's not actually true, but when I tell myself that I only have 3 hours to do it in, I make the broad strokes a lot faster and it's helping me make decisions quicker, which is helping me decide that some things don't even need to be tackled at all. Not 100% sure about the bush of ivy that's behind her head. May make decisions about that later, but for the time being, we're going to leave it. One of the things I like to do, especially right before I'm getting close to the final touches, is I like to take some time away from an image to refresh my brain, remind myself of what I'm going for. And then when I come back to it, I'm more easily able to see this needs to be done, or this needs to be done. This needs to be altered, and I can do that because I haven't, you know, really finalized it yet. Nothing major. Can't make any compositional changes at this point. And you might say, like, well, of course you can, because it's digital and you can just, you know, create a new layer and move stuff around. Everything's separated. It's not all paint on a canvas, but half of, well, you know, maybe even more than half of making art is establishing the composition from the get-go. And once you've established the composition, you're really trying to work towards making that the most effective it can be. And while I can technically move stuff around now, the image is going to suffer. Or if I need to move stuff around now, it means that I didn't do the work that I was supposed to do at the very beginning, you know? So while there is a lot of stuff that I can change at this point, I can't change everything. Okay, I like that general texture. I know this music is incredibly mellow. It's not my normal jam, but Twitch soundtrack doesn't work on YouTube, and I needed to make sure I used a playlist that for sure. Well, I mean, I guess not for sure. Lo-Fi has said that they allow their stuff for streaming, but that doesn't stop YouTube from necessarily making a copyright strike. We'll see. But hopefully it works out. This is looking rad. Thank you. Telby's thanks for the suggestion of the ivy, because let's take a moment and look at it without. It's fine. The ivy really makes it, though. It really, like, literally pulls the whole thing together. Connects both of the sides. It feels like it fits in this frame. It's a really strong element to this. One of the things I want to do in these last few moments while I'm thinking about it is I want to create a selection from the ivy. This is on a new layer. I've duplicated the ivy and I've created a selection from it, but now I'm going to delete the ivy that was on the new layer. And we're going to set this to multiply. And I kind of want to get some shadow into this because I don't really like the contrast so far on the bottom of this. I'd like it to be punched up a little bit. So we are going to take maybe even the gouache brush. I don't know. Let's try it. Take the gouache brush. I've got a blue that I've set to multiply. And I'm taking parts of this that are but I want to be darker. And it's on a low opacity. It's at 48% right now. I might even bump it down even more to like 30%, which really just helps give a sense of grounding of this. You can see as I turn it off, everything just sort of flattens. This helps add depth to it. And I might... We have the time. Let's go ahead and do the same thing with our statue. So I'm going to duplicate the statue with the clipping mask. I'm going to delete the statue in the new layer. And I'm going to set it to multiply and like, 30%. So what the blue is doing in this is it is establishing that we're outside, basically. Because the reason shadows outside are blue is because sky is blue. Sun is yellow, sky is blue. That's uber basic. I'm gonna bring things way back. I might not keep this for the statue, but I do want to like see what happens when I sort of inform the shadows with a bluish hint. Especially where this raven is. So the nice thing about this being on a new layer is that I can decide if I like it or not. I might not keep it. And then what I can do is I can merge it with the layer below it and blend those colors together a little bit closer so it doesn't just look like a blue layer on top of all of this work that I did. You know what I mean? And then one of the things I'm going to do on the background is I am going to basically do the opposite. I'm going to put a yellow down on the lighter part. This is to represent the sun. I'm going to set it to overlay. Maybe add glow. You can see how little this does, but how much it helps. You make the lightness a little bit more yellow. You make the shadows a little bit more blue. They just kind of pop a little bit. So while I originally imagined this illustration to be inside, kind of doesn't look like it now, which is okay. It's totally fine. I wonder what happens. I do the same thing, but I do the multiply with the shadow color, just down here. That helps, just a little bit. Just a little bit. Let's do something fun. I actually don't know if I can do that. I was gonna put all of these adjustments into a folder so that you could see what they look like with them on and off, but I don't think I can. Because I think they're gonna interact with stuff a little bit too much. So I think that's where we have to stop for today. It's, almost 6 for me. But the CAW continues for another couple hours, so make sure you check out the links in the description. There are a few other virtual-only things, so make sure you check those out. There's some amazing artists in there. Humbled to be among their company. And I really hope you enjoyed this stream. If you know me from Twitch, this is a different kind of stream, but I really hope you had fun. I know I did. I really liked this different kind of vibe. And I hope that you can catch me on the next one. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the Corvallis Arts Walk. All right. Goodbye.